At the height of the punk explosion, almost 40 years ago, a handful of women redefined what it was to be a female artist and performer. They forced their way onto a largely male-dominated music scene and became part of a movement that was to radically change the artistic landscape of this country. They came from the squats and suburbs of London and inspired a generation of ordinary young women to believe they could do whatever they wanted. Along with Susie Sue, Chrissie Hynde, Polystyrene and the Raincoats, the Slits were amongst punk's most important figures, and Viv Albertine, their guitarist, has just brought out her brilliantly titled memoir, Clothes, 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 Music, 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 Boys, Boys, Boys. It charts her life as part of this cultural revolution. These were female musicians doing it on their own terms. No sellout, no compromise, no straightforward sex appeal. And in doing it their way, they set the template for the modern rebel girl.
The great thing about punk was that the fact that I was a girl was no longer any kind of a feature. It was a 6-month window where you could kind of sneak in there and see if you could get away with it.
You never heard girls until then absolutely bursting with a really raw primal energy that we had.
We're trying to cause a bit of mayhem, to be honest with you.
Well, you look like you are.
Yeah, we threw a few chairs around.
It was a call to arms for the girls. They weren't background dressing anymore. They were Amazonian punk rock warriors.
Oh, I don't give a shit if you club or not. It's your attitude that counts.
These women were breaking taboos, shaking up the establishment. But did their revolution last longer than a 3-minute pop song?
Almost 40 years on, now mainstream culture has absorbed the shock of these outsiders.
Can the female punk spirit still survive?
Little girls should be seen and not heard. Advantage of you!
It's 1977. Honey and Jackie magazines are packed with girls with perfect Charlie's Angel flicks, wearing flares, pinning posters of Rod Stewart to their wall. Legs & Co. sashay mumsily to the latest disco hit on Top of the Pops. And lovely David Soul is at the top of the charts with Don't Give Up on Us, Baby. The back pages of the NME sell I Choked Linda Lovelace t-shirts in reference to the famous porn star from Deep Throat. Despite the birth of feminism, for many young women, 70s Britain isn't exactly the land of opportunity.
But some young women are looking for something a little more underground, something more dangerous, something they can call their own. That thing is punk rock, and it's in little venues like this one that they get to take centre stage for the very first time.
So it was here, at the Harlesden Coliseum in London, that the Slits, the first all-girl punk band, played their debut gig on March the 11th, 1977. Their chaotic performance and in-your-face irreverence made a huge impact on many of those who were in the audience that night.
I just felt like, I wish it was me. This is what I want to be. What they sang and how they behaved just spoke to me.
Harmon is beating the crap out of the drums. Tessa, all in black, she looks amazing.
Ari, more than any of the female performers, and even maybe the men, typify the spirit of punk rock.
She's flashing in her old raincoat.
You know, it was complete revelation to see them because they were just so energetic, so wild.
It's pretty extraordinary, actually. No women had ever done this before.
The Slits were at the heart of a fledgling London punk scene, which emerged from the clubs and squats of West London. These squats were crash pads and rehearsal rooms, where manifestos were hammered out and punk bands were born. Punk was a howl of frustration, a visceral reaction to the dull British establishment and 1970s pop music's overblown pretensions, and anyone could be involved. Initially, attention focused on male punk bands, but women soon elbowed their way to the forefront, not just as vocalists, but as guitarists, keyboard players, bass players and drummers. And shortly after the trailblazing Harlesden gig, Viv Albertine, who was also part of this closely knit punk fraternity, joined the Slits on guitar.
Let's talk a bit about the kind of atmosphere around punk, because some people may think of it as a kind of aggressive time, but actually it was quite a kind of open-minded time. The idea was that you could do what you want. There was a kind of DIY ethos, wasn't there, around it?
I sort of didn't know punk existed. Well, there wasn't punk. You know, I didn't know there was this way of being yourself on stage and not caring about your accent or how poor you were or where you came from until I saw Johnny Rotten play. And then that was it. It was an epiphany. I think just that package he was as near a girl like me as a boy could be, really. I got left 200 quid, the only money I've ever been left in my life, by my grandmother, and I thought, I'm going to go and buy a guitar. Mick Jones, who was my boyfriend at the time, said, great. I literally couldn't play it. I couldn't hold down one bar chord. And then, I think about a week later, I met Sid Vicious in the street, hadn't met him before, and said, I'm going to make a band. And he said, oh, I'll be in a band with you.
You were practising for quite a while, weren't you, with Sid?
Yeah, we did spend the whole of summer '76, the hottest summer on record, in Joe Strummer's basement, trying to get a band together. We sort of got used to how it felt to rehearse and turn up every day, and then Sid decided I couldn't play guitar well enough to be in the band anymore, even though it was my band.
OK, so you joined the Slits, and did you get a kind of confidence from that environment? Because when you joined the Slits, it was an all-girl group, wasn't it?
I didn't like it being an all-girl group, and everyone at the time was very against being labelled, you know, because we'd been labelled all our lives. We were just these sort of useless, poor, comprehensive school-educated kids. And I said to Chrissie Hind, who was a friend of mine, oh, Chrissie, I don't want to be in an all-girl group, it's tokenistic. And Chrissie just said to me, oh, shut up, Viv, and get on with it, they're a good band. It's very down to earth. It was fun. We were all on the same sort of level. I can't believe how we found each other, because even to this day, I've never met any other women like the other three Slits. Harry and I especially could write together really well, which me and Sid couldn't. He was really crippling to work with, you know, because, I don't know, he wanted to write songs about S&M and concentration camps and things, and I couldn't do it. With the girls, I could write a song like Typical Girls, and they all understood exactly what I was on about and the pressures of what's expected of you to be a young woman.
So should we talk a bit about Ari, because she was a very unusual character.
She did have an extraordinary mind, and she was very, very different and very relaxed about her body. I mean, she pissed on stage, not to be shocking, but she basically desperately needed a piss. And she completely liberated me, actually, about my body. I learned a hell of a lot off her, and we translated that back into the Slits as well.
You don't feel any cunt.
I mean, you can feel the fierceness there, as we very specifically made sure our voices and our backing vocals weren't all girly and breathy. Again, you know, just like when you shout across a playground, you go, oi! You don't go, hey, oi!
You do know there's massive, you know, kind of controversy on the internet as to what the lyrics are in the first verse. Nobody knows.
Well, I don't know.
Female punks were trailblazers, creating not just their own space for performance, but their own kind of music, their own way of being.
They took Malcolm McLaren's manifesto, be childish, be irresponsible, be disrespectful, be everything that society hates, and created their own style, sometimes even their own cartoonish personas.
There was 19-year-old Susie Sue, the girl from the London suburbs whose witch-like look inspired women and made men feel both sexy and submissive at the same time.
You had Susie and Banshees. Susie was the dominatrix with the three pretty boys. It was kind of pervy. It was very good.
Everyone had their own look. Susie probably more than anyone. You know, she had that whole Clockwork Orange thing going, and she always looked fantastic.
There was Polystyrene with her band X-Ray Specs, sporting braces on her teeth and challenging the idea that female performers should be passive and conventionally beautiful.
Polystyrene had a major part to play. She was particularly empowering to women that weren't about looking girly.
X-ray specs had a great image and a great sound. They were so different to everything that come before. Yeah, Polly was a sort of anti-sex symbol, you know, and she wore like a bin bag. It was so liberating for everyone around. You felt like, hey, we can just look like, you know, how we want to. And the songs were just so different as well.
She sang like no woman had done before. It was a kind of scream, really, some of the early songs, scream of desperation. It was all about consumerism. It was all about not being a slave to your desires.
Most people associate bondage with sexual bondage because they think it's perverted and, you know, they think of whips and things like that, but it isn't really. It's about any form of slavery and it's against that. It's saying, no bondage up yours, you know, fuck off tonight.
And Gina Birch and Anna De Silva, who were so inspired by the Slits' first gig that they started their own band, the Raincoats, in November 1977. Within a few weeks, they were playing their first gig. The Raincoats preferred ideas to proficiency and counted John Lydon amongst their fans.
It was all about you putting your own ideas forth and bringing yourself to it. It wasn't copying this guitar player and doing these solos and lots of fancy stuff. It was about you bringing what you had to the fore.
As well as American Chrissie Hynde, who dropped out of art school in Ohio and landed in London at the beginning of the punk scene.
When people talk about this subject, people forget Chrissie Hynde. You have a woman doing what no woman had ever done before, which is playing guitar very aggressively. You play with Chrissie, you have to rock. That's what she wants to do. She wants to get it down to the essence and rock, you know, just as tough as anything men could do.
Chrissie's abilities didn't go unnoticed by punk impresario Malcolm McLaren. She found herself part of a small pool of musicians who went on to form some of the major punk groups.
He was always kind of nurturing me or trying to help me out, which was fantastic because I really looked up to Malcolm. We had two singers. I was going to play guitar just as a boy in the background. But we had one rehearsal. Vivian Westwood came down and she was impressed. She goes, "Oh, Chrissie, you can really squeeze a chord out of that thing." Anyway, they never called me back after that one rehearsal. And the next week there was a new band in town and it was The Dam.
These female performers were standing centre stage, and that was thrilling for young women up and down the country. Also in from America, now renowned photographer Sheila Rock was inspired by punk to pick up her camera and document the scene in its exciting infancy. She was invited to intimate rehearsals and met the artists at the forefront of the movement. Like the punks, she was learning her trade as she went along.
And I went around just photographing what I thought was interesting. You know, I met the Bromley contingent. I met Susie, Billy Idol, Steve Severin.
We've got a picture of Susie here in 1976, so definitely before punk went mainstream.
Yeah.
And she looks terrifying.
Well, she had that dominatrix look about her. Totally original.
She's got a T-shirt here which shows two naked tits, basically, on there. This kind of clothing, did that got a lot of reaction from people?
I think the audience was as expressive in their clothing. But because she's very handsome, she was just very imposing. Punk girls certainly weren't sexy, and it was almost asexual. But she brought something else to the scene, I think.
She looks pretty sexy to me.
But a kind of strength, not a kind of 50s sexy. And it explores very underground roots, I think, and dark, deep things that young people were wanting to explore. But Susie brought it out to the open, I think.
Yeah, that is Chrissie Hynde.
This was Chrissie before she sang. She was writing for the NME. She was the one that invited me to go down. It was near London Bridge. You know, and I had at that time no idea that she had such an amazing voice. She was going for it.
Really going for it.
Yeah.
It's interesting, that band as well, because it's a mixture of men and women, which is which is good, isn't it?
This is kind of an amazing picture, isn't it?
I asked Jordan if I could photograph her. And I thought it'd be really good to get this amazing kind of sex sign. And I just walked across the street, and as I turned around, there was this guy wearing bell-bottom flares who looked a little pervy looking at her. And I just thought, you know, this was like one of those magic moments.
His body language is amazing in this, because she is relaxed but confrontational, and he is simultaneously pervy and really cross.
Yes.
He's really angry. Look at him. It's a really interesting reaction to how she's dressed, I think.
Yeah. I think that she's fabulous.
Yeah, she looks brilliant.
Female punks played around with notions of desire, subverting male sexual fantasies through what they wore. They refused to be submissive. They hijacked the perverted. There was something glorious about all these different shapes and sizes of bodies strutting the 70s streets, wrapped in rubber. Malcolm McLaren and Vivienne Westwood's shop Sex on the King's Road experimented with the lexicon of pornography. They stocked fetish wear, slogan T-shirts and the infamous bondage trousers.
They didn't dress me. I had a few of their things. When I went back to Cleveland, Ohio, I had a rubber skirt and a Scum Manifesto T-shirt, and, you know, I really felt like the dog's bollocks. I did look cool, especially, you know, at a basement in Cleveland, Ohio.
I didn't find it intimidating going into Sex. I wanted, you know, a specific kind of dog collar. Oh, we'll make you one and that. And getting some vinyl trousers, they were great, and it turned out to be very practical because you just wiped the spit off.
Jordan, the shop assistant, was a living advertisement for the power of sex. She wore rubber clothes, a beehive and theatrical makeup. On her daily commute from Sussex, British Rail even put Jordan in first class for her own protection.
They let me travel first class with my second class ticket every day from Lewes to Seaford because of the trouble they knew I was having. So they were really sweet about that.
I used to love PVC and what they used to call in my era wet look. To wear a little wet look Mac with gloves that matched. Oh, it was wonderful.
What was it about sex that attracted you?
I was doing a similar thing on my own to what Vivienne and Malcolm were actually aiming for. We were on a sort of parallel course in a way, and I felt very, very at home there.
What about get Jordan to put on some rubber clothes?
I saw myself as a walking work of art, really. Later on, when I went through geometric makeup, that was all to do with Mondrian and the people of Cow, which is a tribe.
A few people said when they went into the shop Sex, they were quite intimidated. Why do you think that was?
Vivienne used to grill people sometimes, you know, why do you want to buy this?
And what happened, I mean, if somebody gave the wrong answers, would she not let them buy it?
Well, sometimes, yeah. People were passionate about what they made, what they wore, and what their meaning was behind it. And we just didn't want twits going out there wearing it for the wrong reasons.
Would you say that punk was one of the first pop cultures where women could appear threatening in that way?
I would say probably yes. It was a time of sexual equality, I believe. Women were quite liberated by it as well. And men and women could actually look very similar. And if you like, try and outdo each other when they went out. You know, they'd be like sharing each other's makeup. And it was a great thing, really.
There's always an ideal woman's shape that we are given. And women like yourself and other punk women didn't care. And there's something very refreshing about seeing women in all sorts of shapes, wrapped in rubber, in ripped T-shirt, whatever you want, walking down the street. There's something really beautiful about that.
It didn't matter what size you were, how tall you were. It was really how great you looked.
Punk also had its own sexual codes. Despite the rubber clothes and the provocative way of dressing, it was mostly very asexual.
Sex wasn't really a feature in the punk thing, as far as I never really noticed it. I mean, some people were getting their end away, but it wasn't really the thing. You weren't dressing to attract the opposite sex. You were dressing to tell everyone to go fuck themselves, basically. It was a real up yours mentality.
As a guy, if you had any intentions other than intellectual or musical one with these girls, they were soon cut short, because these women just had this attitude that kind of knocked that out of the arena. You didn't mess with these women. They weren't girly girls. They would stand eye to eye with you and give as good as they got.
Nevertheless, for many punk women, the streets became a battleground. Punk invited confrontation, and punk women in their rubber stockings and DMs often confused middle-aged men who didn't know whether they were coming or going. Such confusion could sometimes flip into violence.
Did the Slits get hassled? They were physically attacked on the streets. Literally. You've got to understand that they deeply freaked people out on a psychological level. On the White Riot tour, we had to bribe the coach driver, Norman, to allow them on the bus. Not because they did anything to him, but he just couldn't compute. You know, women weren't supposed to be like this.
There was guys just cruising the streets, old-fashioned macho guys who were the norm then, just thinking that maybe how you looked, you were a prostitute. I got spat at and attacked many times. Harry got stabbed. It was just part of everyday life.
The Slits' appearance sparked controversy, whatever they were wearing or not wearing. But unlike many other female artists at the time, they remained firmly in control of their image, as they showed when they appeared topless on the cover of their debut album, Cut.
And here they are, looking fantastic, bare-breasted, defiantly outstaring the camera's gaze. This was an amazingly audacious thing to do. Few female artists, if any, had posed topless on their album covers, and it caused a big controversy. Rough Trade had a massive argument amongst the staff as to whether they should stock the album at all, and supposedly one man tried to sue Island Records for crashing his Rolls Royce when he saw the three Slits bare-breasted on a big billboard.
That just evolved that day. We had a female photographer, Penny Smith. We just got a bit over-relaxed towards the end of the day and started slopping mud on us and all that kind of thing. But we were very sure that we had to choose a photo where the look was right. We looked confrontational. There was no come-hither look or nothing submissive about us.
I really like the Slits cover. It's earthy. It's definitely making a statement because they're naked, but it's sort of not sexy. It's not objectifying.
For every image that went out about us, every word that went out about us, we fought and fought and fought for it to be right, because we were redefining how women, girls, were seen in the media.
The Slits' cover of Cut marked the height of punk's exuberance. By the early 1980s, many of the first generation of punk women left the industry as post-punk shifted to new wave pop. Artists like Anna De Silva, Gina Birch and Viv Albertine made a tactical retreat into family life.
I think anyone who's been confronted in aggressive situations for, say, 6-7 years non-stop, and having to fight and argue all the time your point of view, you know, whether it's with Rastas or A&R men, old boyfriends or new boyfriends, or, you know, friends who thought you changed too much, people in the street spitting at you. I mean, 7 years of that, yeah, I was exhausted.
Punk, like all youth movements, was of its generation. Its story has become cultural folklore, so familiar that we forget the power of its primary revolutionary drive. We can't believe it was ever a threat. It's been a long time since British rock music has carried the whiff of political danger.
Punk attitudes are mainstream now. Even Middle England distrusts the police and politicians. We're all anti-establishment these days.
So, did punk women win? After all, it's no longer shocking to see a woman on stage. But as these outsiders were absorbed into the mainstream, the revolution has become commodified. Fetish gear and bother boots are on the high street. A sneer in fishnets is a way to make money. When everyone's selling punk attitude, can it really mean anything at all?
Now people want the goods, you know, now people want to be on the cover of a fashion magazine. I mean, my policy is if Lemmy wouldn't do it, don't ask me to do it.
If you're a young woman now dressing in fetish gear, you just think, well, that's sexy, or I'm trying to please my man, or I'm trying to get attention to be noticed in the music industry. When we were dressing in fetish gear, it was a political statement. It had never been seen before outside of, you know, sleazy bedrooms or magazines.
Still, the impact of that brief revolutionary period continues to reverberate. You can see punk in the pioneering attitudes of artists that come later, rewriting musical rules, doing what they want. You can see it in the Riot Girls, who explicitly brought punk and feminism together. And it's hiding in Lily Allen's cheeky lyrics and bursting out of Pussy Riot's protests against Putin. Punk even lives on in emerging bands, such as the excellently named young London trio, Skinny Girl Diet.
If you want to say something that's provocative, if you want to look different, if you want to say something different about sex and gender, then punk's a pretty good place to start.
Punk's really not dead, it just keeps on evolving. Just like the original wild girls of punk themselves, who continue to break new ground. Although kids and life might have taken them away for a while, in the last couple of years, many of the original women have started to write, play and record again. Gina Birch and Anna De Silva are working on their own material and making a Raincoats documentary. As well as releasing a solo album and writing her memoir, Viv Albertine has made her acting debut in the film Exhibition. And Chrissie Hynde is currently touring the UK with her first solo album, Stockholm.
Feels like the universe just grew.
You know, anyone can start when they're young and they're beautiful and they have their youthful exuberance and, you know, and they don't have anything else to do. They don't have to get through the real part of life, which is having a family, paying the bills, you know, getting on with it.
To me, life is like challenge, 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 stretch, stretch, stretch. And I did have a period where I couldn't do it. I didn't have the energy and I'd been very ill and I had my daughter, etc. And it all went from me, but it's back now and that's what I'm after.
I find that we're on stage that we're sort of ageless. We have our songs and we go and perform them.
I go and see Yoko Ono perform when she's 82, 83, 84, and I think 20 more years, 30 more years. It's perhaps the time of the older woman, you know, and why not?
These are grown women performing and creating as they please. Not just playing the old hits, but creating new songs about how they see the world as older women, ex-wives, mothers, humans, artists. And just by doing that, they're breaking some of society's phobias about age and gender. That seems pretty punk to me.
2, 3, 4. Home sweet home, home sweet home, home sweet home, home sweet home. I've peeled the potatoes, there's not much left to do. Lovely lemon drizzle cake, heat up the fondue. Tasty courgette quiche with a nice crispy top. 100 grams of biscuits in a fancy box. Never try to rule another person's life. You will only lose your lovely fragrant wife. And don't nag a guy, go changing who he is. You are not a god and it is not your biz. Home sweet home, home sweet home. There's such a thing as lust, there's such a thing as friends. But romantic love was made up way back when. In another century things were not so great. Same thing with marriage, it's an unnatural state. I chose being an artist over being a wife. Now I'm gonna lead a very lovely life, life, life. Wife, 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 life, life, life. Wife, wife, wife. I hate my beautiful, clean, white, pristine, minimal